Hey there, and welcome to the Build Me a Brewery podcast. My name is Chris Hayton, and this is part 3 of the Marketing, Design and Beer Media segment. In this episode, I chat with highly sought-after graphic designer within the craft beer industry, Jarrod Fuller from Zendoke Design. A very chilled out and down-to-earth character, Jarrod has a large portfolio of breweries both here in Australia and internationally, and many listeners may have put hands on cans that he has designed, such as Nail Brewing, Six Strings, The Australian, and many more. In our chat, we discuss the process of engaging graphic designers and outline that it's a two-way street in regards to making sure it's a good fit for both parties, as well as covering design concepts for logos, cans, and packaging, and even going deep into a brewery's brand identity and developing an authentic story that the brewery wants to send out to its target consumer base. This is another interesting chat and topic in the overall marketing and branding piece, so I hope you enjoy it then, my chat with Jarrod Fuller from Zendoke Design. Welcome, Jarrod, to the Build Me a Brewery podcast. Thanks for coming on, mate.
Thank you.
And we were talking a bit off air. You're slogging out a lot of hours these days, only getting minimal sleep, and you sound like you're really busy.
Yeah, that's correct. I've always been busy. We're pretty small. I am the designer, the accountant, the business development manager, all those things. You get help from lots of people, but yeah, it can be a hard slog, but it's good. It's exciting.
And I've given the audience a bit of a quick rundown about your background, and obviously this episode is tailored towards the graphic design side, specifically around can designs. I guess I really want to get your insights about, what aspiring brewery owners or even established breweries, what they need to be considering when it comes to brand design. That can include logos and general theme of the brewery, and maybe sort of somehow incorporating their story or what they want to sort of be perceived as with all the other things going on with cans and packaging and all that. So I guess I just want to pick your brain about the consultations you tend to have with other breweries about when they're looking at inspiration and creativity around design. But before we get into all that, mate, I'd be keen to find a bit more about, your background and how you got into graphic design, and, and maybe even some home brewing or craft beer stories that you have of how you became passionate about the industry. So yeah, go for it, mate.
Well, I've always wanted to be a graphic designer way back since I was a little kid. I used to be called a commercial artist back then. So the people that used to paint signs on the fish and chip window, that's what I wanted to be. Yeah. And then I got to year 7 and realized that industry was dying. So it pretty much transitioned into graphic design. So pretty much my vision as a child has always been do graphic design. So my journey in graphic design was high school, uni, work, and that's pretty much what I've been doing for the last 23 years now. Wow. Yeah. So it's been good. Got to travel a lot, got to see lots of really interesting places, work with really interesting people. Been a lot of hours, a lot of hard work, but that hours and time put in created where I am now, opportunity. So yeah, pretty exciting. Pretty much born and bred in Perth. It's where I grew up. It's where I've come back to nest, and we're pretty lucky at the moment. Obviously, all the turmoil going on. It's a pretty ideal place to be in the world right now. And we're very lucky to have pretty amazing weather. So yeah, beer and good weather is always a nice mix. In terms of craft beer stories, I actually got into craft beer through craft whiskey. So I'd been like a sole trader. I just freelance or doing projects on my own for maybe 10 years, and then an opportunity come up where I redesigned this distillery in Perth called Whippersnapper Distillery. I didn't have much work on, so I just decided to make it the best thing I could do at the time and then try to sell it to them. And they bought on. It was a really good project, so I decided to launch then Zendoke, which is my business, and just use that as the vehicle to launch me as like a different entity. And through that craft whiskey, I met all the craft breweries. So at the time, I was only really drinking Feral Sly Fox, was the biggest dip of my toe in the craft beer. That was like 2014. That's about as big as it got, and just being around those people and the local craft beer industry, because they're usually at craft festivals together. You just try something interesting, it leads you somewhere else, and pretty much just pushed my taste by the breweries and the brewers are putting out. So my taste in beer is diverse. I literally drink anything and everything, give everything a go, don't have favorites, but I guess like most people, I like a big resiny IPA, and
Yeah.
if I had a go-to, that'd probably be a comfortable place at home and sticking a big resin boy in my face.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much where it goes. Like the community here is very, very friendly and including. And once you know someone, it just becomes one big family of high fives and free beers. So it's pretty good.
Yeah, I'd imagine you would get a lot of free beers being in the design space. You know, your expenses for craft beer is expensive as is, but it's a nice little perk to have.
Yeah, it's always good to research and develop, and it's a necessity week to week. But yeah, from my point of view, you work hard, and it's nice to be able to share that experience that you help create with the people that make the beer. So you almost feel like you're on a journey together, and it feels rewarding when it goes good.
Yeah, it'd be pretty unreal to see other breweries that you'd work with, and that's your can design that's sitting in a bottle shop fridge, or be pretty amazing to sort of see that.
Pretty exciting last year at Frio Beer Fest. The Nail VPA can was like a 6-meter inflatable.
Yeah.
Didn't really know I ever wanted to have one of those in my list of life achievements, but yeah, it's a small win for like small family businesses. So it's always exciting when you see that they got to a scale where that's happening. It's exciting.
Yeah, so Zendoke, is it Zendoke or Zendoke? How am I pronouncing it?
Well, I say Zendoke, but I don't mind Zendoke. I taught myself
Zendoke.
Spanish once, so Zendoke makes more sense. But it was always meant to be mysterious and more about just creating a conversation and being that little bit different. I wanted to put stuff out there, especially my work, that was different to the norm. I try not to be a normal graphic design studio. I do different things. People get to deal with me direct. I'm hardworking and passionate, and I'd like to think that my work is just a little bit different to others. So that's what I wanted my business to be, and it's a made-up word that I actually came up with a friend in uni. So it was nice to revisit it and use it. And the best thing about it is when you Google it, you get all my work. So it's owning a space. So not Zendesk, Zendoke.
So graphic design is very broad, and part of this segment of the podcast series, planning to have a marketing PR agency come on, and I'm sure they've got some overlapping information to share on the design and branding side. But you being hands-on and coming up with that inspiration and the actual physical designs, what are some of the range of services you would offer a brewery when they're looking at coming up with some designs around branding and what goes on their cans and packaging?
There's usually like a basic starter kit that most smaller ones will come with, whether they've got existing logos or not. I'd always like to work with, I guess, my ideas. So I like starting from scratch, really. If there's stuff that's working, like existing logos and stuff, then I might just add my little bit of flavor. But for most part, people want identity. They're like logo, their visual language, there's like their colors, their typography, like little elements that go with like the whole brand identity and the language that they use to tell their story to people. And that's like the basic business stuff. And then if they're ready to go into package, then thinking about how that works. Like sometimes it's not just a case of sticking a logo on a can, and you have to come up with the like visual, the style that things are going to look like. So it's always interesting to work out what that vision is. And if they're not ready for package, at least to be able to consider it. So when they are, and you're designing the identity, that you actually have a path moving forward, that's where you're headed, rather than just thinking about things on the go. So it's actually better to plan. So I think all those things are good to think about on a small level. And then on the bigger level, there's like the way you speak, the language you use when you talk to people, who you actually wanting to target, like what are you hoping that they're going to think of you and their perception of who you're going to be. And beyond that, just helping them dumb down what their story is. So sometimes that takes a long time to work out. Sometimes it's easier for others. that naturally just have either worked hard or are gifted with what they want to do and who they're about. Other people just homebrew and move straight into I'm just going to open a brewery and don't really think for any other reason other than I just want to make my beer.
Yep.
But you have to think about why do people want to buy your beer, and then that helps. So the story side of things is important. It's hard, like strategy people come in and like pick that apart, but it's good just to have a basic idea and your own inverted commas strategy about moving forward. You can, on the bigger side of things, you can go really deep on it, but it's more about just having a good, honest story that you can retell over and over and over again without boring people.
Yeah, and do you have a particular, I guess, style? There's all these different people that say they specialize in lettering or geometric type styles, or I don't really have an artistic bone in my bodies, but so I guess that's why I wanted to have someone like yourself on and explain this sort of side of things. But yeah, what would you say would be your preferred style or design, or if you have many?
I think looking at that as a whole, a couple of years ago, in my head, because I work with a lot of breweries, you're always trying to come up with a unique and interesting way to present them. So you just don't look at it and go, well, that's another version of that client. So in my head, I'm always trying to push hard to make them so different and diverse. And that might just be the way they're like the illustration style is, or the way the typography is, all the elements and how that work. But in recent years, people like to point out that I have a style and it's recognizable. So I guess if I have to judge it, it's just bold. I do use a lot of color. I do use a lot of illustration, and I like illustration for the storytelling side of things. So I think creating something that is unique or looks different is what I try to focus on. Using geometric shapes and that kind of stuff, it's easy for someone else that doesn't have the skills that I do to replicate that. So then why would someone come to me when they can go to someone else and use geometric shapes and those kind of style things? It's not saying I can't do that and I wouldn't do that, but if I did, I'd do it in, I guess, an idea strong way, something that makes it interesting or engaging. Or I think most people respond to craft. It doesn't matter if they don't like the style. They actually respond to someone looks like they've spent some time and made it look the best it can look. Just even the placement of elements that are so considered that it just looks like beautiful, and things can look beautiful in a very ugly way. There's beauty in the eye of the beholder, but just I guess consideration of things. It's like anything. You buy clothes, you buy cars, you buy things. And if you spend more money, is it because there's more detail, or it's a nicer looking thing, or it makes you feel nicer? I still think all those things are relevant. So like some of the cheap seasonal stuff for beers, you can just do a quick smash out illustration because you have to. I just prefer, I have a saying that my best work's my last work, and that's what I kind of live by. So I just really hate just pumping stuff out for the sake of it. I want my last work to be like remembered as like just good quality and well crafted, and that's more a personal thing than for a business. But I guess that's what I try to put into my work.
Yeah, and especially if your work's going to be so public, and it's people are going to say who did that game design, and if it looks absolutely rubbish, it's sort of would hurt your brand, I guess. So
everyone wants to be loved. I once did I did a really good identity when I had not much budget for an accountant, and they said they wanted to be a craft accountant. I did it, they bought into it, and then in the last minute they just came back and went, oh, we want this idea. It was like a shitty compass, and I just went, oh, F you guys, gave them a shitty compass, and then pissed it off. And every time I drive to the beach, I pass this shitty job, and I've got to look at it every friggin' time and go, I don't want to have that feeling ever again. So that kind of was an important part in my life. That it doesn't matter how bad it gets, just keep pushing, because I know that the solution will get there. But shitty compass accountants, that's what drives my craft beer business.
Yeah, fair enough. And on your website, you list a number of breweries that you've actually worked with. I don't know what your policy is on sharing specific breweries that you've worked with, but care to talk about some of your major works or
Yeah, sure.
Standout breweries that you've worked with?
Where do you start? I guess chronologically, it's probably easier, and then no one gets favors.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't mind talking about them. They're all on my website. One of the first ones was a small brewery called Nowhere Man, and I did their identity pretty much straight after I did Whippersnapper, and that's how they made contact with me. And that job lay dormant for, it felt like 4 years, maybe 3-4 years, and that was only because he was capital raising and finding a venue and all that kind of stuff. So when they finally launched, and it was all top secret, so I had to sit on it for like 3 years, burning a hole in my social media account, waiting to post something because I thought it was good work and it would get me more. And when it did launch, and it's still going strong now, I don't know doing their packaging, but the identity was something still, it didn't date, and I was proud of that. So they were a small one. The bigger one straight after that was Nail. So Nail, they've been around for a long time, 20 years. John Stallwood makes amazing beers. I got that job through main marketing guy at Ferrell at the time. They share a brewery, Brew Corp. So that was my foot in with Nail. And that was a really simple task of just literally get this beer in people's hands because he makes consistently gold medal trophy awarding beers. Just tidy it up, make it approachable to the wider public, men and women. And literally just, it's not rocket science. It's put a logo on it nice and big and front and center. And it's core range. His stuff is like just predominantly core range. So that's a good, I still like that job. That's the really good exercise in just consistency, knowing what you're going to get and trusting that the beer will speak for itself. The one after that, which was Boston, was completely different. Strange coincidence of venue, destination. There's so many things working against that job. They were in a very small pocket of like WA that not many people would go to. I think the town has less than 10,000 people. It's like a Sleepy Hollow. It's a destination place for caravanners when they drive past to call in, have a meal and keep going. Amazing part of the world. So the whole point of that job was the complete opposite, was like just to shout. They made really good beers. It's rare that I go to a venue or a client and they line up their whole, like, I guess, tasting paddle. I think there was like 10 or 12 beers and you drink through them and you're just like, wow, like 8 out of 10 I really enjoyed. I thought they were really good quality. So it was about letting people experience that as well. So that job was good just for shouting, come up with a really bright, bold at the time. So I know we're talking, but this is purely for your purpose, Chris. These little bright cans.
Oh, yep.
It was my actual first canning job I did for them. And I just went in pretty gung-ho and blind. But it was at the time when no one was really, other than garage projects and those kind of ones, there wasn't really a massive, crazy craft beer like shelf presence. So really just tried to make a wow statement with those cans so then people would pick them up and enjoy them. And they've been, for such a really crazy graphic can, they've actually stood the test of time. They're almost 5 years old now. So for something
they look like they would stand out on a bottle shop shelf though.
Especially when they're blocked together, they're really good.
Yeah.
But because at the time there wasn't a lot of that, so when you looked at it, you just went, "Wow, that's crazy." The illustration style was trying to get away from that really masculine, like grungy stuff that was going on at the time, like really like heavy metal graphics on cans. It was more to go the opposite into like the pretty fruity kind of illustrations. There's like a camp devil on a mountain, and it just opens you up to such a wider audience. That's probably my most well-received job. Like a lot of people comment on it. A lot of people really like the illustration style because it is kind of naive and simple, but well-crafted. I like it because of the cans. Pushing my background, I have a lot of like technical experience because I did a lot of design artworking where you actually take a lot of other designers' ideas and roll it out into the actual production fabrication side of things. So I get really into pushing an idea through the production. Like that would be a part of like the process. So with those cans, it's really just exploring with Aurora what you can actually do with a can in terms of like transparent inks and opaque inks and like turning a can into like something that's an experience. So it's hard to explain unless you see it done. But Yeah, it's almost this balls to the wind. I don't know how to explain it. Like blind naivety, just going in, just would be an expensive mistake if it went wrong. But I think with the risk, you get reward. So, and I was lucky enough to have a client that had the trust to do it. So, a long-winded story. Just look on the website and you can get some visuals. But I think what's different is that everyone puts beer in a package, but everyone has a different, like they're at a different place in their business. They got a different like objective about why they're selling the beer and what it means to them. Like the difference between 100,000 liters and 600,000 to 2 million is completely different proposition in terms of what you can or want to do on a can. But then there's also that idea of doing things differently. There's tried and tested ways of doing things, and it's nice to do what everyone else is doing, but you get a following and you get reward for also just shunning all that and just being yourself and doing something completely different. But with that, you just don't want it to fail. But I guess that's the risk you take when you do these things. I think people just respect confidence. If you're confident in who you are and what you do and how you're going to position your business and your beer and the look and feel of that, then I think people just respect that. And then I guess they just want to become followers if you've got that confidence.
And I guess just on the topic of brand identity, why is brand identity and brand consistency so important for a brewery when it comes to their product line and I guess who they are as a brewery?
I guess if you sum it all down into brand, I don't like to speak too much about like the theory of brand because it's well written and there's a lot more learned people than me. But from my experience, like the idea of a brand is not actually what you're pushing out, it's what actually people are receiving. So it's what people actually think of you. Like what would their mates, or how would you describe like a brewery to another person? So it's this idea of perception. So having the consistency and identity helps them know who you are and what you do. And that stems from not just the visual, but also the product and the beer. So if you're doing like just beers all over the shop, like well-fermented beers, and then putting out an imperial stout and like all these kind of things, it's actually better just to focus on what kind of core beers you're doing and can you consistently make them. So every time someone picks it up and drinks it, they're going to have the same, if not the similar experience. So the repetition makes it easier for other people to tell their friends who you are and what you do. And that is, for me, the cornerstones for building this level of trust. And once people trust you, they want to go on the journey with you. They want to wear your shirt. They want to drink your beers. They want people to know that you're proud to be out there, like one, drinking the sauce, but also flogging it to other people. Because that's, I guess, the easiest way to expand your business and like grow organically is through word of mouth, and giving people the like consistency in your brand identity will like ensure that happens a lot easier than if you're all over the shop. Like a pub that opens in the morning and sells bacon and eggs, I always find it confusing. What are you, a cafe or a pub? Like there's all these different ideas. Like do one thing and do it well is like I always think.
And I guess when a brewery approaches you to sort of engage your services, what are some of the considerations that they should be considering when it comes to their branding and design? Is there anything they should sort of be thinking about before they sort of engage your sort of services?
I don't know if they have to think about it before. It's always good to have, like, as part of my job, to maybe elicit what they should be thinking about and where they could be different just through that experience. But I think always researching, like any business, researching your market, finding out who's doing what kind of place you can occupy that's different to others, because that's going to put you in a position to be successful. Like if you give people a choice between A and B and you both offer the same thing, you're not really going to get your piece of the pie. So it's easier just to be different, own a space and jump on that. I think the main thing is the why. Why are you making the beer? What's the purpose? Do you have a story to tell, and can you share it? And you find they're the easiest jobs to work on. When like you can get through the first year easy, but 5 years on, if you don't have a story and you can't tell it, it's hard to own the truth. So then you're just pretty much running on hope and dreams and fads. I find it interesting, like you get people that like graffiti, and I love graffiti. I grew up with it. It was a cornerstone for a lot of my style, I guess, growing up with these very influential graffiti artists, but it's a very limiting style to, it only appeals to a very small like section of the market. I always find, and once you get to a certain engagement of that, it's really hard to grow and come up with new and interesting ideas. But if you get into like street art, that's completely different and appeals to a lot more wider variety of people. That just that little shift in those like market perceptions are actually interesting. And the same thing with not just, that was an example, but it's the same thing. If you have big ideas about your style and what you want to do, it's just researching, like, if you want to grow and be a massive brewery, is that going to hold you back? And it's natural to grow up and shift. Like, everyone does it. A brand is very similar to, I guess, you and me. Like, my version now as a middle-aged man almost was completely different to what I was as a teenager. So like, businesses grow like people. So you naturally evolve, grow up and change and shift. It's just working out that where you start out can be like the cornerstone to like what path you take and how quick you get there.
And are you able to offer, I guess, any tips or advice, for those that aren't exactly that creative or artistic? I put myself in that sort of group of people, but talk to us a bit about like how you work with those types of clients, and I guess how do you sort of draw those ideas out of their head as to what they perceive their brewery as, and what sort of brand do they want to represent?
Well, in terms of like the nuts and bolts and not the visual side of things, because the visual side of things you'll get there easier. In terms of the creativity, that's never a problem. Like, that's the reason why you'd employ a graphic designer, is that if someone comes to you with like something they made in Canva and it's like, oh, no thanks, don't show me that, because they have an expectation in their head of what they think they are. Whereas from my point of view, I can look at the business, see the opportunity and reimagine them to the point that your headspace isn't in that. Like, the years of experience make me say that this is what you should be creatively, and this is how we're visually going to like execute this story. So like, it's not a negative not to be creative. Like, you wouldn't go off and just like architecturally design like a hotel because you wouldn't trust it. So it's not a bad thing to trust the people that you want to like bring that skill set. In terms of helping them with the strategy, there's like little workbooks you can do that help you think inwardly, and they're always interesting journeys to go on. There's a couple of like really good examples. I use this, it's another graphic design company, but it's really good for they're in America, Codo, CODO. They have like a building a brewery job handbook, and it's all about just answering the questions about your brand values. And as my business, it's just a really valuable and interesting tool to like let people go through and work out what their core values are, find out what your brand essence is, like what's the most compelling idea behind the brewery, that almost like not what you're trying to tell other people, but internally, like the decisions you make, do they actually tick what your brand essence is? Like, what do you want this business to be? Like, if you're making decisions to put on like a bar, and what's that going to be and what food they're going to serve, does it actually tick the box of like who you actually want to be and the essence behind that? And that it just makes the decision making easier. Like, it doesn't meet the criteria, it's not going to be us, and all those little things, I guess, help. I think the original question you asked is like, how can, like, if coming to me and working out what is and what story you have to tell, was that the original?
Well, yeah, I guess just how you work with those sort of clients to, I guess, come up with whatever theme or brand identity that you're coming up with. I'm sure they've got an idea in their head, but if they're not artistically, inclined, I guess they need someone like yourself to sort of drag that out of them. And, there's styles that I really like, but if you ask me what they are, I wouldn't be able to describe, or I'm sure there's a particular style. Like, I hear, you were talking about geometric type shapes and designs. And I know that there's been people that are very good with lettering or calligraphy, like the Grifter guys. I actually quite like their sort of thing that they have. They've got this sort of running, writing, calligraphy type thing going on. And it seems very handmade and industrial and craft to me. And so I guess it's, people will sort of throw those things at you, and then you'll be able to, you're a good soundboard, I imagine, to sort of say, well, it sounds like what's appealing to you is this kind of style. And, and then
totally.
Yeah. So
to be honest, if people come with those kind of ideas, like broadly of what they like, that's always going to help, but it's not going to hinder. So, and what it means is that it actually channels down the areas to which, like, finding out what people don't like and what they do like. Finding out what people don't like is actually probably more important than what they do, because to maybe steer away from that and then play around in areas that are going to be well received by either you or the client. But also, if you think there's an opportunity, and if I always see a big idea, I'll always present it. Like, whether they like it or not, they just need to see it and understand it, and then they do. Probably take my hat off. Sometimes I try to be like a big design studio, but essentially it's just me and what I am. So to sum it up in like non-corporate ways, I just get a vibe when I meet people. It's a connection. I can kind of, it's like everyday life. I meet people, you have an understanding. It's almost like a speed dating app. Sometimes you work out, this is going to go well, this isn't. I get a vibe, and they can't really sell that on a branding story podcast, but sometimes you just get a feeling. You leave a meeting, you have ideas, you go and formulate, you see what their story fits in, and then it organically, just through research. And I just like to throw heaps of time at just not trying to get to an answer, but just going on a journey. So just going down weird rabbit holes. And I know if I go through that process, no matter how long it takes, the outcome is that well considered that it makes sense. And then it's a lot easier to sell the story. So yeah, it's hard to sum up. And I guess a bigger agency that has a lot more creative people under a bigger umbrella will stick to the core structured things of having a strategy meeting, workshopping, creating like the strategy moving forward, giving you a tangible document with like your Venn diagram and your sectors and where you sit and your positioning and all that. Being a smaller studio, run on vibes.
Yeah.
That works for some people. Like, some people actually want a bigger agency. They want to be able to go to their shareholders and say, well, we're going to spend X millions of dollars, tens of thousands. We need a strategy document that we can at least present to our shareholders and say, well, this is where our money's going, and justify. I get that. And it's probably in the last couple of years, I can actually see like there's a wide range of graphic designers. There's a wide range of branding agencies. Like, I'm just, I guess, a smaller pocket, which is a graphic designer that specializes in alcohol, not by choice. It just ended up that way. So if you're a brewery starting up, there's so many different avenues you can go down. So it's working out, like, are you just a family run small person that actually would like that personal touch of like someone, another small business investing with a small business and going on a journey? That's probably where I sit. The bigger rebrands of like larger corporations that have like branding, like little minions that can like roll out this big production schedule and do all this, then maybe that's a better fit for something that's going to be more, I guess, mainstream and just pumping out generic branded, like I wouldn't say non-craft, it's the wrong word, but it's more just saying there's lots of ways to skin the cat. So it's just working out what works for you. I think a lot of people, from my point of view, see my work and go, I want that. And that's like word of mouth. It's pretty much how my business grew. And with that is a world of trust. You don't have to try prove yourself to anyone, because the proof is in the pudding. So obviously they're connected with your work or what you've done. So that then builds a level of trust. So I guess if you came to me and wanted me to do your work, it's because you've already thought about, maybe I'm a good fit for you. And then we go on a date, we catch up, and then you call me like, yeah, you want to catch up again? And all of a sudden you're in a relationship, and then you go on a journey. It's very similar. It's a design Tinder.
Well, I guess that was another question I had is, what sort of things would you offer as advice for when you're shopping around and trying to find the right graphic designer for you? I guess you probably just answered a couple there about, whether you want to be, big scale corporate, or, want to be represented as a craft beer brand or family run or something more local. But what about in terms of technical aspects and experience for a graphic designer? Like, we're talking about styles and all that. I imagine that's something that, people should be considering as well.
I think at the end of the day, well, it's a business. So you're trying to use creativity / art in a commercial way. So you want someone that understands that at the end of the day, it's not a bottomless pit. You need to get a return on investment to actually make it worthwhile. So having someone that has experience is always good, but what you get with no experience is lower fees. So if you don't want to spend much money and you want to go a little gun-ho, then someone out of uni or a junior with some skills might get you there. And then you can grow organically and go a little bit wild. And I think at the end of the day, it's like anyone. You look at someone's work, you ask to see what they've done. It's like, I use the house stuff, but builder, you got to buy, like anything, you got to buy or service. you just want to know what they can do and get recommendations from other people. But yeah, it's hard to explain why I would want someone to go to another graphic designer, because I wouldn't.
Yeah. Well, you're never in the business of shopping around for one, I guess. So you.
But it's still a two-way street. Like, I can see your business and I'd look at it and go, I don't think it's a good fit for me. And I guess the joy of having lots of work is that you can actually be objective and see it's a two-way street and go, I actually think you'd probably be better going in this direction. This is why. But it's not to say that my work couldn't work for like large-scale commercial projects. But if I look at my body of work at small family-run businesses, or just ones where it's like more about the human experience than the commercial money lab pumping system. I don't know. In terms of like helping someone to choose a graphic designer, the easiest way to do is Gab's brought out like the can design stuff recently. That's a massive phone book for graphic designers. Like, you can literally go through, look at the cans. It actually tells you who designed it. And then you go on a journey, look at their work, look what they do. I really like Bodrigi stuff, like crazy venue, awesome art, and then I never knew who did their work, and all of a sudden you find someone through that one event that then, even me as like a designer, just excited to then connect and see what other people are doing and what their body of work, because beer isn't the whole business. They actually do other things that might not be beer related, so it's always interesting to see what influences people. And it's the same thing if you're looking for a graphic designer. Just find those resources and go on a journey. You'll find someone you like. For some businesses, they like to spend a lot more money and know that if they spend a lot more money, they think they get a better result. So those people exist. And then you've got ones that just like the style or like what you've done for other things. So I guess it's a personal journey.
And speaking about money and costs, and I don't expect for you to give us exact figures or anything, but what would and it does vary on what services they want. I'm sure you've got the full suite of services, and that's going to be, you're going to be doing everything for them. What is a full package entailed for a brewery, to everything from their logo to their can design to their packaging? Is that what a full package would sort of entail?
Yeah, so you'd normally dumb down costs into, and I'm speaking purely for myself and not for an industry. So you'd have basic fees, and they are what they are, but you dumb it usually down into identity, because normally you need the identity before you need the packaging. Yep. And I think with all this stuff, time is the key. Like, if you spend more time and, like, let's say example, you start engaging this kind of work 12 months out, I think that's realistic. Like, the idea that you can just pump an identity out with packaging as an afterthought with 2 months ago, people just don't know what it takes. But like, if you're trying to go on this journey, I'd always think even just the identity for me usually takes 4 to 6 weeks, and that's just to get to a presentation stage. Like, the research side of things takes me like at least 2 weeks of just like scouring the internet and going to libraries. In terms of the cost, it changes a lot depending, and my fees are going to be completely different to someone that has 20 to 30 staff, overheads, massive office, and there are all the other considerations. The reason why fees change and vary completely between people is just the dynamics of how you run a business. Like, I have less overheads, but I also spend way too long on jobs. So I need to find the balance that I don't take on that many projects. My hourly rate is terrible, but the body of work that comes out of that, I need to be able to provide for my family. So these are all how I get to my fees. That what they do and how they are, they change. But yeah, I don't want to say too much on the podcast because I might change them next week.
Yeah, no. Well, I don't expect you to sort of, and it is always a bit of a touchy subject when you talk about people's costs involved. I don't expect you to sort of publicize it so everyone starts calling you up and saying you quoted Chris Hayton on his podcast that you charge this much. But I guess giving listeners who are maybe formulating their business plan and they're starting to put together a budget of, this is how much I'm budgeting for my brewery equipment. This is how much I'm budgeting for my marketing and branding. So
I can give you ballpark figures. Like, normally an identity, and they'll be big ballparks because they'll change. But identities usually can be anywhere between and this is like my business. I'm not talking about someone that comes out of uni and just like came up with something that's cool, but it might be anywhere between 5,000 and 15,000, and the packaging might be same again, if not more. It depends on there's taps, there's kegs, there's package, there's experience, there's venue. Like it's a huge kettle of fish. In terms of like startups, like the way my business runs, I get it. And like in the day, mine's a cash flow business. Like you need cash to be able to survive. So if you're starting up, you have a conversation, you can actually, like, I need cash flow, you need cash flow. So you just work out installment payments. I don't care how I get paid as long as I get paid. So like usually with breweries, it's nice that, well, you're not going to be in the position to spend that much money at the beginning because you got too much equipment to buy, all that. But if it's staged over like 12 months and the journey, then it's an easier way to be able to budget and work out. Like a lot of people say I can't afford it, and that's fine. There's plenty of other people to try, but that's like the costs are relevant. Like most of my costs are based on what I need to be able to do the job rather than like time and effort. So obviously time is the key for it, but some jobs come easy, some jobs come hard. Like sometimes you get to a roadblock and I won't put stuff out that I'm not proud of. So another month is spent the market of a brew house job. I just couldn't draw a piece of type, like a little bit of word. I just couldn't do it. It took me a month. You can't charge for that. So it's really hard. The job costs this much, and that's what you use it at the potty, and that's what happens. But it's more about just setting budgets. So yes, it changes, but it's purely based on the work and the effort and me being able to pay. Like I have a girl that works for me like pretty much full-time freelance, and then I have an illustrator that helps me in Sydney. So it's getting them involved and being able to pay them and all that. So cash flow is the main thing, and then budgeting for like a brewery would be very similar. Like you just want to be able to, we can't afford it now, but once we open, we'll be able to pay more bills, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's just having that conversation before you start.
So it'd be reasonable to say that, a brewery could expect anywhere as low as 10 grand for a brand identity and packaging or upwards of 30 grand, just depending on what the scope of works is required.
Totally. And they can go even higher. Like some people will want to go through like the strategy side of things too, and going through that with a big agency, that kind of like information isn't cheap. So going through that process and formalizing that with a big team of big team, learned people, putting all that kind of strategy things. There's so many different horses for so many different courses. I guess when you get to that stage, you'll have a feeling about what you think. I think the easiest way most people, from your point of view, probably think is like, I want to be like this brewery. What did they do? So, for example, when we started up, I guess Little Creatures was a big brand, even for like craft distillers, that the branding agency that did Little Creatures probably got a lot of work because everyone wanted to be them. And that's similar to how my business has grown. You do a good job on like Nail and Boston, and then people want their version because they're like, it worked for them, I want it to work for me. So yeah, I don't know, money is always an interesting one. Like I wouldn't say I'm rolling in my limousine and living on a yacht. So it's purely just a way to function, to be able to do what I do. Like I'm lucky enough to like work in an industry where I'm passionate and excited. Like ever since day dot, it's what I do. If I'm not working in a job, I was working at home. Like probably not a smart thing in life, but the opportunity it gives us is that we get to travel a lot. That's a big part of my life. We get to go to all these regional breweries. That's exciting. So I think it's just making a connection when you're trying to find a designer. I don't know. It's a case by case, but they can't really just bunch it all together in one and say this is what you need to do, because there's so many different answers. You get people that aren't even trained graphic designers that can do a perfectly good job. They might just be a well-talented artist. They're obviously not going to get you to like a massive like rollout of marketing materials and all that, but they might create like a brand for you that is so unique and interesting because it's not polluted by all these other ideas. And then from that, then you can get the other agencies in to then drive you into a bigger market. But coming up with that core identity, sometimes you're actually better off having just highly intelligent, creative people that aren't forced to produce something in 50 hours. You got 50-hour budget. And once the 50 hours are up, and that's what I've always struggled with, it's like, wow, this idea is pretty shit. Oh, well. And that's what it was like in studio land, working for other people. It's like, once you hit your quota, it's like, well, hurry up. You're wasting money. Package it up and present it. So there's so many times you'd see something. It's like, what an opportunity missed, but you can understand how they got to that. Like they might have a good idea. It's just not executed to the best it can be because it's the reality of working in a bigger studio. You just got to tick the boxes, put in the timesheet and check out. And maybe the bigger agencies, having a smaller agency, they might be more emotionally involved with you because their success is important to you, because you're not just a business, you're a human being. And I think that's what I get being a smaller business, is that human connection. Like, you just don't want to F up for you. Like, if it all went pear-shaped and it was a waste of your money, it's like, oh man, I just pissed all their money in the wind. Like, there's a obligation, which is a lot harder to, I guess, stray away from. Like, I'm invested in your work, you're invested in my work. Like, it's a journey of going on that together. That would be my upsell for smaller agencies. Bigger agencies, completely different.
Do you find a lot of more established breweries being your clientele, or do you also get a lot of startups engaging with you? I'd imagine that a lot of startups think they can do it themselves, or they have a mate who's quite artistic and can draw, but maybe has never had any experience with, the full rollout of a marketing suite of materials for a brewery. But is it more established over startup?
It changes. I wouldn't say I get a lot more of the established ones, because once they get to that point of being that established, they're wanting to grow to the point of, I guess, over 1 million liters or above. And to do that, you need to sell beer. You need in-house designers or a whole team of marketing people and that. So I find a lot of my work is either startups or ones that maybe go on a journey. They've bought their 99 Designs logo just to start their Instagram page. They've started making beer, and then all of a sudden they got to the point. A lot of it comes in when they go, oh, we're going to go into package, and that's when they actually stand up and go, all right, this is going to cost a lot of money. How can we make sure we don't stuff this up? And that's a lot of the time my work would be, do you mind looking at the business? And obviously I'm going to look at it and go, well, I can fix your identity, let's create something, and the packaging, let's do this. So I think it's half and half. Like, I'm a small business, brewery clients, I'm trying to look around and see what I've got at the moment, but just from memory, they'll be either ones that have a venue that sell over the boat, like a brew house, and then they want to go into package. Or I'd probably say a lot of the decisions made, packaging forces their hands. Once they go into that, it's a massive investment, and it's not just you selling your identity and the experience. Like, as a venue and your brand, it's pretty easy to control your brand because a lot of it's based on service, having a good experience, drinking well, getting looked after, making feel like you've got that. But once you lose that control and it's down to relying on the experience beyond the venue, that's when you have to start, I guess, making your money work, because you don't have the control of trying to control most of the touch points and elements of which you can sell your messaging.
Well, really didn't think this segment would require as much information, but it's a big piece, isn't it, in the whole brewery building side of things?
I love to chat, and then I'm looking at time. It's like 11. It's like, why didn't we have a beer? I could have talked even better. Like, a lot of the stuff was like formal and structured, but like, my passion is like talking about this just relaxed and exciting. Like, I know it's serious, but it doesn't have to be serious. Like, just get your structure right, get your foundations right. There's so much fun you can have, and it's exciting. And it's just exciting when someone reimagines what you've created in a different way, and then they go, like, seeing other people like take your logos and do things and like push it is also exciting. So I don't think it's anything to ever be stressed out about, but yeah, I could do with a beer.
Well, any further thoughts or closing advice you'd like to offer people wishing to get in the brewery game and having their own beers out there? Any further tips on the branding and design side of things?
I think, like most things, just go. The easiest thing to do is find people you admire and work out why you admire them. Find out how they did it, and that might help like your journey and the path you want to take. And even ask those breweries, like, how did they experience and what would they change? Asking questions. Don't ask, don't get. That's a pretty simple way to live by. Like, don't be afraid to ask questions. Your gained experience will make it a lot easier to formulate a path forward than just let's just do this because someone said do it. It's like anything, big projects, just the more research and the more focus you can get and ask questions. Well, it's about the stuff that goes wrong that makes the journey, I guess, better. So asking other people what mistakes to avoid would be the biggest advice for me. And then beyond that, just conversations are free. You want to chat, have a chat.
Those that are currently in that position to design or think about brand identity, how do they reach out to you, mate?
The easiest thing is go to the website, Zendoke.com. My email's up there. Social media is always good. Most of my beer stuff appears on social media because I don't actually have that much time to update my folio on my website. So you find that gets done at Christmas once a year. So the easiest thing is at Zendoke on Instagram. There's usually a beer a week going up on that at the moment.
Yeah, nice. Any interesting can designs that are going to be part of that Gabs category, or any interesting projects?
Yes, definitely. I learned my lesson this year. I thought this year there'd be so many crazy designs, so I put in my most basic one and it'd get noticed. Complete opposite. Just go crazy. The worst thing they ever did was like choose one per like brewery, but ever since that I've got at least 6 or 7 since that, which are ready to go. So there's a couple of really good ones coming out in the next. We got Frio Beer Fest next week. I don't know when you put the podcast out, so there's about 4 cans coming out for different breweries. So it's exciting. It's nice to bring out a nice, exciting can, but good thing I find with the work is that they're helping to tell the story. So there's a couple of things on there that if you look at, I guess they'll start making sense. So yeah, Instagram's always good. Once the borders open, always happy to fly east for work, inverted commas, catch up with mates, have a talk about a beer.
Yeah, nice. Well, if you're ever over in Sydney, mate, love to sort of catch up, and who knows at what sort of stage we'll be at. Still obviously in the information gathering stage, but if you are out Sydney or East Way, reach out.
For the first time in everyone's life, they're probably wanting to come to Perth because not many people come west. So the invitation is also offered in return, but I don't think our premier's open the borders anytime soon. So thank you for your time. Available anytime to chat. It's been fun. It's always interesting to look internally at this stuff. You don't usually think about it that much. I've not had to do it that much where you try to explain what you do and why you do it, but I guess it's been valuable for me to try verbalize it because I'm quite a visual person rather than talking. So what I've worked out is speed dating analogies for beer is very similar. You can form a relationship like a Tinder date. So that's been eye-opening.
Well, thanks again, Jarrod Fuller from Zendoke or Zendoke. I'm going to call you Zendoke Design from now on. But
I like Doki.
But thanks again, mate. I'm coming on the Build Me a Brewery podcast. Thanks for listening to the Build Me a Brewery podcast. That was part 3 of the marketing, design and beer media segment. In part 4 and our final episode of the segment, I chat with well-known journalist and commentator of the Australian craft beer industry, Crafty Pint founder James Smith, where we chat about how a brewery can take advantage of beer media publications and mediums such as the Crafty Pint and many others. As always, if you are liking the podcast so far and find the content useful, please give us a follow and rating on whatever platform you're listening on. Also, follow us on all our social media handles, as well as visiting our website, www.buildmeabrewery.com.au, and much more complimentary content will be coming your way if you sign up to our mailing list. I'm Chris Hayton, your host, and this is the Build Me a Brewery podcast.